Just please, when you're playing video games, don't scream. Okay. All right.
All right, so just quickly to go over some of the functions on Zoom. As you can see for the attendees, you cannot see or hear each other. If you would like to interact with the remainder of the audience or with the panelists, you can type in the chat, or you can go to the Q&A and ask questions. So whenever we get to the Q&A portion, please add your questions into there and we'll be sure to answer them at the end. But welcome everyone. So thank you to Fair Districts PA for coming out tonight, or I guess joining us on Zoom tonight so that we can talk about gerrymandering in Pennsylvania. This is a huge issue, especially for this upcoming election, and there have been a lot of things that have changed in recent weeks that we're going to be talking about today. And I would like to introduce our speaker today, which is Tony. So your vote does not count as it should in Pennsylvania. Gerrymandering, drawing voting districts to favor or disadvantage a party or candidate, is seen by many elected officials as an acceptable way to attain and hold political power. Politicians in safe districts are unaccountable to voters. They need not, and indeed often do not, represent the interests of their constituents. This is democracy denied. Today, our speaker, Tony Crocamo, represents Fair Districts Pennsylvania, which is a nonpartisan coalition of citizens and organizations seeking to reform Pennsylvania's redistricting rules and make the process of drawing districts impartial, transparent, and accountable. For more than 30 years providing marketing services for international engineering and design firms, Tony now presents Fair Districts redistricting reform presentations across the state and conducts FDPA workshops on how to lobby state lawmakers. Tony and Christine, his wife, live in West Hempfield Township in Lancaster County, and he will be speaking to us today on Democracy Denied, Why Voting District Maps Matter. Please welcome Tony.
Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for coming to yet another Zoom meeting. I know it can be kind of tedious to do these things, and I'm going to move it along pretty quickly. I have a sense that since I'm speaking to the Center County Democratic Committee, that you have some grounding on the issue. So it's going to be 4 parts to this presentation. I'm going to define the reapportionment, redistricting, and gerrymandering. I'm going to review Pennsylvania's 2 redistricting processes. There's 2 redistricting processes, one for congressional districts, federal districts, Washington, D.C., and another completely different process for drawing the district maps for legislative districts, the State House and the State Senate. I'm going to talk about both of those, and we're going to discuss changing the process. And then I'm going to encourage your involvement with this issue and give you a call to action on what you can do and how you can help solve this problem in Pennsylvania. Okay, so apportionment is the required reallocation of seats among the states every 10 years based on the US population figures. It's why we have the census. It's in Article 1 of the federal Constitution. So you count all the people in the United States, in each state, and you divide up the 435 congressional seats. It's capped at 435, and it has been since around 1919 because of, well, it's my grandparents' fault, actually, Italian immigration at the time. And it's that argument between urban populations and rural populations. And people were concerned about these, and the language of the time, it's going to sound somewhat familiar, these uneducated Italians coming in and living in cities, and suddenly they were getting more of Congress people because rather than capping them, and they were concerned about these great unwashed tides of my relatives coming over here and messing things up and having more of a say in the country than the rural. So they capped it at 435. So in Pennsylvania in 1990, we had 21 congressional seats. And after the 2000 census, we lost 2, went down to 19. And then in 2020, well, we have 18 right now. And in 2020, if present trends continue, we're probably going to lose at least 1 and have 17 congressmen and women for Pennsylvania. So redistricting is simply redrawing boundaries for the state Senate districts. There's about 254,000 people in each Senate district, 50 of them. State House districts, 203 State House districts, each comprised of about 62,500. And then congressional districts, the 18 congressional districts currently in Pennsylvania, each have about 700,000 residents in them. Okay, there's one procedure for congressional districts and one for state legislative districts. I hit on this topic a lot. So gerrymandering, what is gerrymandering? It's simply drawing district boundaries to benefit a party or a candidate. And it comes from Elbridge Gerry, who in 1812, the governor of Massachusetts, approved a redistricting plan that, according to the Boston papers, looks something like a salamander, and that's a portion of an editorial cartoon there. So they matched up salamander with Gary's name, and they came up with gerrymandering. Correctly, it's gerrymandering, but that ship has sailed. Everybody says gerrymandering. Now, the interesting thing is, Elbridge Gerry is one of our founding fathers, and he was involved in this redistricting scam, this gerrymandering. He signed the Declaration of Independence. He was at the Constitutional Convention, refused to sign, to vote for the Constitution at the convention because he wanted a Bill of Rights in the Constitution. And he's the 5th vice president under Monroe, I believe under Monroe, 5th vice president of the United States. He died in office, which is not much of an accomplishment. But it just goes to show you that, here is a founding father, not one of the major lights, but he does, signs the Declaration of Independence at the Constitutional Convention, early vice president. And what is he known for? Gerrymandering. So that's a life lesson for us all. You can do a lot of good things in life, but you make one major boo-boo and it taints you for eternity. So Pennsylvania's 2 redistricting processes. One for the federal government, U.S. Congress, Washington, D.C., and the second for state government, State House and Senate in Harrisburg. Okay, the federal government process. Majority party draws the maps. They're voted on by the state house. It passes because the majority party draws the maps. That's why the majority party, so it passes. And then it's voted on by the state senate and it passes because the majority party draws the maps. It's signed by the governor. There's no public input. And there's limited legislative input. In 2011, those maps that were thrown out by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in May of 2018, nobody saw what those congressional districts, the boundaries of those congressional districts, until hours before the Senate voted on them. So there was no input by the legislator, and many of the legislators don't realize this. They don't realize that nobody, they think they're going to be talking about the boundaries and having a discussion and a debate, but no. The party leadership at the time kept all that information quiet. There were some hearings in May, then no action at all until December of that year. And the bill was signed, well, the bills were voted on Christmas week of that year when people are kind of busy and distracted and a lot of other things going on. And nobody saw the boundaries until like 13 hours before the Senate voted on them, and then the House voted on them the next day. So no public input in that process, limited legislative input. So when legislators tell us that, well, we like to keep the legislator involved, well, they're not. So process for drawing Pennsylvania state and Senate House districts is embedded in the Pennsylvania Constitution, Article 2, Section 16. The Commonwealth shall be divided into 50 senatorial, which shall be comprised of compact and contiguous territory as nearly equal. And it's 203 representative districts. So 50 senatorial, 203. They did that. We have 50 senatorial districts and 203 representatives. Now, it says shall be. Now, I'm not sure if there's any lawyers on the call, and if you are, I am not giving legal advice. But in contract language, legal terms, shall means will means may, and may means might. So when the Pennsylvania Constitution says shall be divided into 50 senatorial and 203 representative districts, it's got to happen. Shall means you got to do it. Okay? Constitution also says, unless absolutely necessary, no county, city, incorporated town, borough, township, or ward shall be divided in forming a senatorial or representative district. I've got some notes here. Look at some maps in your area. And I believe Ferguson Township is in House District 77, 81, and 171. And Patton Township is in House Districts 77 and 81. Now, apparently they found it absolutely necessary to divide up Ferguson Township into 3 different representative districts. Was that truly necessary? I don't know. You would know far better than I. But they shouldn't be allowed to do that sort of thing. Okay, so the Pennsylvania Constitution spells out how this process is done for the legislative districts. Member political commission consisting of 4 party leaders, the 2 members of the majority party, 2 members of the minority party, currently 2 members of Republicans, majority party in Harrisburg, 2 Democrats, minority party in Harrisburg, or their appointees, and those 4 party leaders pick a chair. And if they can't agree, and they can't, then the state Supreme Court picks a chair. And this is important because the state Supreme Court currently, when they do redistricting after the current census is over, and that data comes to the state, and we figure out how many seats we're going to have, the Democrats will control the process because the state Supreme Court is majority Democratic right now, and the chair will be a Democrat, and something tells me that the Democrats are going to draw the lines to their advantage. I know I'm speaking to a Democratic committee, but my experience is that both parties do this. What the Republicans have done to Democrats in Pennsylvania, the Democrats have gleefully done to Republicans in Maryland, in Chicago, and they used to do it in California until California changed the process for how they draw the lines. Political parties, I don't want to break anybody's heart here, and political parties are not altruistic organizations. My experience is once you get up to the state level and higher, they are interested in winning. And not everybody at those levels are interested in winning, or that mindful about how they win. They just want to win. So political affiliation of the chair determines which party controls the process, and parties that control the process, in my experience and across the United States, tend to gerrymander. The basic attitude seems to be that gerrymandering is awful and pernicious and a terrible thing to do, undemocratic, un-American, but only when the other guys do it. When we do it, not such a bad thing. It's hard to square that. But there is no public input in this process. And there's no legislative input in this process. They draw the maps, and the only way you can challenge them is through the courts. The governor doesn't have to sign it. So that's how that process works. So why is this important? Well, this is just a very simplistic example here. You got, in these three rectangles, you have the same number of yellow and the same number of green squares in these rectangles, 50 of them altogether, representing 50 districts, okay? Now, in the middle one, you draw the lines, the district boundaries like that to get 5 districts, and green, even though they have 60% of the vote, green wins all 5 districts. But on that rectangle on the right, if you draw the district lines a little differently, yellow gets 2, yellow gets 3, and green gets 2. So even though green has 60% of the votes, they only get 2 of the districts out of those 3, 40% of the districts. That's how gerrymandering works. Nothing in this graphic has changed except where the lines are drawn and the results of those elections. Okay, so gerrymandering results in fewer choices for Pennsylvanians. Now this chart is based on races in 2018, and I'm sorry, 2016. So in 21 of the 25 Senate races throughout Pennsylvania, no primary challenge in 84% of those races. In 178 out of 203 House races, 88% no primary challenge. And that's understandable. And I know I'm talking to a political group, and you know how difficult it is to buck the party. And you know how difficult it is to run a campaign if you're in a district that is overwhelmingly of the other party. And it's tough to get people to run, and you got to go out and you got to get those petitions signed, get all those signatures, and run a campaign. And in some districts, you're going to lose. And it's hard to get people to run in those circumstances. So it's not surprising that in the primary, there's 84% and 88% no competition. But look at the general election. In the general election, 111 out of 228, 48.6% unopposed in the general election. Nearly 50% of the races for the state house and state senate were not races. You gotta have 2 people. Gotta have minimum of 2 people for it to be a race. 48.6%, the only election that counted was the primary. And now I don't want to denigrate primary voters. I'm a primary voter, but on primary day, if you've ever worked the polls, and many of you have, it is the type of atmosphere where it's not unlikely to hear something like, "I would never vote for a Republican. They are the devil incarnate, and I could not bring myself to vote for a Republican." And on the other side, you get people saying, "I could never vote for a Democrat. They're the devil incarnate. They're just awful, and I could never vote for a Democrat." So if the only election that matters is the highly partisan primary, and it's our fault as Americans that we don't have better turnout in the primary. It's just a shame that a lot of our problems would go away if we had higher primary output. But we are increasingly a country of moderates ruled by either end, because this is everybody in America that could vote. All right, half of those people register to vote, and then in a presidential election year, what do you get? You get maybe 60% of those people vote. And then in a primary, what are your primary rates out there? I mean, in Lancaster County, 17 to 23%. And you get this slice of highly partisan people picking leadership for this slice. So we are increasingly a country of moderates governed by people picked by highly partisan people. And we can see it in our governance. You can see that change. Gerrymandering results to inefficiency. Again, if you're not accountable to your constituents, you don't have to really do your job. You can do other things. Pennsylvania passed 381 of 5,594 bills in 2013-2014. That's at the bottom 25% of bills passed in states. Lowest of all full-time legislators. And we have the largest full-time legislature in the country. I think Minnesota has a larger legislature, but they're part-time. Lowest percentage of bills passed of all states, 7%. Okay, now I'm not suggesting that all 5,590 something bills would have made good law and should have been passed. But I think it's fair to argue that if 93% of what you do doesn't result in legislation, why do we need the largest legislature in the nation? Couldn't it be part-time? If 93% of the work goes down the tubes? And inefficiency can be seen in the lack of initiative and work on property tax reform. Now, the property tax reform gets lip service at every election. Every election, they're going to do something about property tax reform, and they're going to do something about equitable school funding. We can't let this go on anymore. Something's got to be done. And unfunded state pension obligations, and roads, highways, and bridges. Our infrastructure is in terrible shape. We got to do something about it. We can't keep kicking the can down the road. Redistricting reform. People say, redistricting reform is a result that, Fair Districts PA has been active because of the 2016 election. Not accurate at all. We've been involved in redistricting reform years before that. It's been over 4 years that we've been involved in redistricting reform. And in fact, the Fair Districts PA is a growth, an outshoot of legal women voters. And redistricting and gerrymandering has been an issue with them for decades. And there have been bills in the Senate and the House in Pennsylvania for decades on redistricting reform, and they haven't done a thing. So what does Fair Districts want? Our initial priorities were an independent redistricting commission, transparent process, public participation, strict timeline for completion. We didn't want any politicians or lobbyists drawing the maps. That was our plan. And our approach was, we had 2 bills and 1 commission. We had a tight timeline. We had House Bill 23, Senate Bill 1023 to change congressional redistricting. And we wanted that to pass by July 2020, select a commission, have that trained and in place by early 2021 in time for the census results. And then House Bill 22 and Senate Bill 1022 amended the PA Constitution, the State House and Senate redistricting process. That would be passed by July 2020, passed again February 21, and then a referendum in May 21. But, so the commission impaneled under the first bills there would be in place when the Constitution amended. And then the commission could draw the congressional and state lines. Well, that is now impossible. That ship has sailed. That window of opportunity has closed. The party leadership in Harrisburg, the Republicans this time, made it impossible for us to achieve that goal. We've had bills in front of them. We've had a lot of work over the last 2 years. In fact, again, Fair Districts has been working on this for 4 years. But after more than 2 years on these last 2 bills that I mentioned, no Senate or House vote. We couldn't get a vote. We could not get a vote on Fair Districts legislation supported in the House. Despite having more co-sponsors in both sessions, our bills had more co-sponsors than any other legislation. In the House, we couldn't get it out of committee. We had supporting resolutions by 24 counties in Pennsylvania and 386 municipalities, which comprised about 70%, more than 70% now, of the population of Pennsylvania. So governmental authorities representing 70% Pennsylvania's population passed resolutions supporting redistricting reform, and the legislature ignored it. Fair District PA has over 100,000 signatures, petition signatures, supporting reform of Pennsylvania voters. These signatures are gathered at polling places. We had 540 supportive letters to the editor across the state, in over 100 publications across the state in the last 2 years. Still, legislature didn't care. We had an F&M poll last year that showed, the poll showed that 66% of Pennsylvania citizens support redistricting reform. Legislature didn't care. I want to talk to you about what were introduced in 2019 and just in June of 2020. Senate Bill 1166 and House Bill 196. Senate Bill 1166 was a joint resolution to, in part, amend the Pennsylvania Constitution to limit the governor's emergency powers to 21 days. Currently 90 days. Republicans are claiming the governor is destroying the economy rather than taking care of the health. You know, I don't know how you have a thriving economy until the health issue is stabilized. But they want to cut the emergency powers to 21 days. And the next bill, House Bill 196, amend the Pennsylvania Constitution. You notice that 2 bills to amend the Pennsylvania Constitution, which the legislature has been telling us, oh, that's a tough process. We don't do that very often. Very hard to do. Very hard to do. Oh, that's a steep hill. Amend the PA Constitution to have politicians draw regional districts for judicial elections. Okay, so they want to amend the Constitution to have politicians, they want to amend the Constitution to gerrymander, to be able to gerrymander using the same process they do for gerrymandering now, the same committee. They want to apply that to judges. And you know why? Well, because Pennsylvania has about a $1 million plurality. Pennsylvania Democrats outnumber Republicans by about 1 million. Okay, and consequently, statewide elections for judges get a lot of Democratic judges elected. That's why that's why the Supreme Court is a Democratic majority. And if you remember, in May of 2018, the Supreme Court, dominated by Democrats, threw out those congressional districts, and the Republicans have tried to impeach them. They've tried to, all these things. This is revenge for that. They've had their fill of decisions they don't like, decisions that go away from their desire to gerrymander and do other things. And so they want to amend the Pennsylvania Constitution to gerrymander judicial districts to fix the problem of the people voting in Democrats. So Senate Bill 1166, it was introduced in June 2020. Now our bills, remember our bills, no action in 2 years. Senate Bill 1166, introduced June 2020, passed July 14th, 2020. A little more than a month, about 5 weeks. Our bills sit there, stuck in committee for 2 years. Their bill, 5 weeks. Didn't have any testimony. Our bills had testimony on them, multiple hearings, no testimony, no public comment. Our bills had plenty of public comment. No debate. They cut off debate. House Bill 196, introduced in January 2019, passed the House in December 2019, voted out of Senate State Government Committee, July 13th, 2020, passed July 15th, 2020. Both of those are amendments, resolutions to amend the Pennsylvania Constitution. You know, very difficult process. You know, hard to do. Good news is, you will have an opportunity to vote against both of those measures, all of those measures. These bills were fast-tracked by the state government chair, John DeSanto, Majority Leader Jay Corman, who some of you may know. That's your state senator if you're in District, 34? And President Pro Tem Joe Scarnati. It's a little bit like Lucy yanking the football away from Charlie Brown. Now, I don't want to characterize Fair District PA as Charlie Brown, but we did get shafted on this. Okay, the public be damned. Now, Vanderbilt, that's his quote, the public be damned. He said, the public be damned, I'm working for my stockholders. That's where that quote comes from. But state chair, the majority leader, and President Pro Tem, they are saying the public be damned. Everyone that voted for these bills ignored the support, the genuine support behind the bills that Fair District had. They fast-tracked these bills. They tied up our bills. And despite all that support that we had throughout the state, the public be damned. This is not what democracy is supposed to look like. But we're not, yeah, they won that battle, fine, okay. And we can't have an independent citizens commission because we can't have time now to change the Constitution under our plan for in time for the census. And if we don't do something, the processes that they have in place now are going to extend to judicial districts, and they're going to be able to gerrymander those for the next 10 years. So we, Fair District, supporting House Bill 2638. It's the Legislative and Congressional Redistricting Act, LACRA, and it is our Plan B. Now, LACRA summary, and I believe that Ava has circulated the LACRA summary to all of you, and take a look at that. But this is a little bit less detail. So it's LACRA summary. We want transparency in the process. We want public engagement, public involvement in the process. We want clear, measurable map criteria, and we want to prevent gerrymandering and promote accountability. That's what we want, and that's what the LACRA bill does. Now, it's been introduced in the House, and I haven't confirmed yet that it's been introduced in the Senate, but Senator Killian will be introducing a mirror bill in the Senate, a LACRA bill that's going to be the same. So we'll have to watch that, and we're going to be working to push those forward. So, excuse me, what can you do? Well, you can schedule a speaker. You go to the Fair District website and you schedule a speaker. Join Fair District PA, sign a petition, like Fair District PA Facebook page, share the Fair District PA post. We have a Twitter page as well. Talk to your neighbors about this issue. You can write letters to the editor supporting House Bill 2638. Mention your state representatives and your senators and demand their support. Yeah. You can call or write your legislators. Tell them to support the House Bill 2638. Now, they're going to be back in session in September, but they're home now. And so it'd be a good time to set up a meeting to go see them, talk to them about this. And tell them that you're going to vote accordingly in November. If we don't vote these people out, well, they're going to continue doing what they do. All right, now, citizenship is a contact sport. Now, this information that I have in this, the next few slides about your legislators, Ava also, I believe, circulated, and it's Center County legislators. And those links in that document that she circulated should be live. And if you don't have that document, you just contact me or Ava, and we'll get that to you. Now, okay. Now, a lot of people say, oh, calling these people, I don't want to call these Republicans. You know, they're not going to do any good. It tells them that this is an important issue to you and that you're watching them. And they're supposed to be our representatives. So you got to tell them what you want. And if you don't want to talk to them personally, call after 6 o'clock at night. No one's going to be there. You leave a phone message and it'll take, I'm telling you, it takes like a minute. Hello, my name is, I live in, I am a constituent of yours. I want you to know that I support House Bill 2638, LACRA bill for redistricting reform, and I will be voting accordingly in November. Please support this legislation. Boom, you're done. You call after the, they're not working late, so you can call after, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 30 seconds, you're in, you're out, you're done. Send them a postcard. Say the same thing. Tell them the same thing. So contact Representative Stephanie Borowitz and Representative Scott Conklin. Now in that sheet, with the contact information, it gives the voting record, or it tells you whether or not these legislators co-sponsored Fair District PA bills or not. You can also write Representative Irwin in District 81, and Carrie Benninghoff in 171. She's a majority whip. Your area is interesting. I believe, and let me go back here. I believe that, Stephanie Borowitz is on the state government committee, which handles this type of legislation that we're talking about. And then you have majority whip, Carrie. And you have the majority leader. Now, Jake Corman is not going to agree with you on this issue, but that's okay. He's the majority leader. He is your senator. So give him a call. Let him know how you feel. Let him know it's important to you. Let him know you don't like what he's done. Let him know you see through the judicial redistricting plan. So those are the basic information. If you have any questions, how are they going to be handling questions? They're going to be putting them in, well, I can't hear you.
Yes. So please just, thank you for the presentation, Tony. Please just put your questions in the Q&A box or the chat, and then I will read them out as they come in. A lot of the legislators that are currently in office that Tony has spoken about, a great deal of them are up for re-election this cycle, except for Jake Corman, who is up in 2022. So a lot of these candidates are being challenged by Democrats. So if you are have a vested interest in getting them out of office, I encourage you to work with your local committee and support those candidates that are running for office. But go ahead.
I would also suggest that you talk to your Democratic candidates and have your Democratic candidates make this an issue about what Jake Corman did and what the Republicans have done. And if they want to have a true voice in Harrisburg, they gotta vote those people out. This is a really good issue for every Democratic candidate.
Yeah. And I'm going to start with some questions. Okay. So, Tony, if you could tell us, so if Fair Districts does not accomplish its legislative goals prior to this upcoming election, can you explain some of the scenarios that will likely occur when the districts are redrawn?
Well, okay, I'm expecting, first of all, we can't get any change before this session is closed. This session is done. So we're hoping early in the next session to get our bills passed and to have a better process in place by the time the new census things come in. But what I expect will happen, I expect that the Democrats are going to have the majority for the state legislative districts. And I expect them to draw the districts more favorably for Democrats. Now, I recognize there is an attitude out there that I fully understand. There's a lot of Democrats I've spoken to that say, now it's our turn. I understand it, but I think democracy is too important to fall prey to that. And I also think that if it is undemocratic and un-American when the Republicans do gerrymandering, the same adjectives apply if Democrats do it. Even though you might like the results better, that's something to be resisted for the sake of democracy. So and as far as the the congressional districts are going to be drawn. Okay, now the 2011 maps were challenged in 2011, and the then Republican dominated, majority Republican Supreme Court held that those maps were, it could be done better. And there was a young woman that challenged the maps and drew maps and submitted them, and the Supreme Court said, well, you know, her maps are better. And this court didn't adopt her maps. What the court said to the committee was, you know, go back and redraw them, do a better job. And they went back and they did a less bad job. I mean, the maps that resulted after the Supreme Court said those maps were pretty bad, the maps that resulted for congressional districts in 2011 were considered among the most egregiously gerrymandered maps in the United States. We had Goofy kicking Donald. We had maps that went all over the place. It was just, it was outrageous. And the Republicans had, what, it was a 15 to 3 plurality for Congress, men and women, in Pennsylvania, even though there's 1 million more Democratic voters in Pennsylvania. 15 of our 18 congressional seats were Republican, 3 were Democrat. That shifted around after the maps were thrown out in 2018, determined to be unconstitutional. And the court gave the interested parties 3 weeks to come up with different maps, and there were 8 parties that submitted maps. There was a map submitted by the governor and the lieutenant governor and the House Democrats and the Senate Democrats and the Republican House and Senate, and a couple other friends of the court submitted maps as well. In 3 weeks, they did these maps. So that whole thing about, oh, this is a terribly complicated process and it's hard to do, and you know, it doesn't really fly when 8 different organizations, 8 different groups were able to submit maps inside of 3 weeks. The court didn't like any of those maps, threw them out, and hired a master map maker out of, I believe, Princeton, who came up with our current maps, and that changed the balance in Pennsylvania. I believe it's 9 to, I forget how, well, anyway, it's majority Democrats now that for congressional seats in Pennsylvania. So I would expect the same wonderful people that drew the gerrymandered maps in 2010 will do them again. It's going to be Republicans in control of that process. So the Democrats, I think, Democrats are going to gerrymander state maps, and Republicans are going to gerrymander the congressional maps.
Thank you. So COVID-19 has made the census gathering operations increasingly harder, in addition to the Trump administration's movement to discount residents that are not U.S. citizens. Do you worry that the districts that will be drawn in 2021 will not be representational of the actual share of residents in Pennsylvania?
Well, I'm not sure they're going to be representational of
Regardless.
You know, okay, yeah. So if you discount, if you have, think of who doesn't get counted if you discount non-citizens. Non-citizens are going to be, I would judge, mostly urban areas that you know, remember the city rural divide I talked about from 1919 when my grandparents came over? That still exists, you know. So urban areas, high concentrations of Latino, maybe higher concentrations in rural areas of undocumented workers are going to be undercounted. So rural areas, conservative areas, Republican areas are going to have a disproportionate amount of congressional representation. So
right.
It's outrageous that that's being done. The Constitution just says count everybody. Doesn't say citizens. Doesn't say voters. Doesn't say. And this is back when, I mean, the Constitution famously, egregiously, to our shame, there was a compromise on whether or not to count slaves in the South for congressional representation. And that's where they came up with the, okay, we're not going to count each slave as a whole person. We'll do it as 3/5 of a person. And, a lot of people think that that was a comment on a slave, a black, is only 3/5 of a white person. But it was really just for the congressional count, and was a compromise because the North didn't want them counted at all.
Thank you. We had a note from Arthur Goldschmidt. One of our residents here, his name is Kyle Hines. He's a junior at State College Area High School. He has actually won the prize-winning districting map for the political map for Pennsylvania. So he's actually one of my interns. He's not on here tonight, but he is an incredibly talented person.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah. Can you tell us how many other state legislators in the U.S. gerrymander their districts? And if it's common?
Yeah, it is not. It is common. And Maryland is gerrymandered in favor of Democrats to an outrageous extent. Chicago, Illinois, in favor of Democrats to a great extent. California was gerrymandered in favor of Democrats to a great degree until they reformed their redistricting process. What was that, Debbie? 3 years ago, about? They got an independent citizens commission in California. You're muted. I think you're muted, Deb. Yeah, we can't hear you, Deb, because you're muted.
Sorry. Okay. So, yeah, in California, they passed it 8 years ago.
8 years ago. Okay.
So
time flies.
They went through the complete election cycle with the new process, and now they're gearing up for a fresh commission to do the census for 2021.
Yeah.
Actually,
by the way, Debbie is the primary contact for Fair Districts PA in Center County.
I'm sorry, I just misspoke. I believe it was 2008 when California passed their reform legislation that was part of a voter initiative. Mm-hmm. So they went through the process in 2011, and now they're gearing up to do a new panel and be ready for 2021.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because this will give you some kind of an idea of whether or not legislatures are prone to gerrymandering. The redistricting reform movement has had its greatest success in those states where there is a ballot initiative, where you can petition to put the issue on the ballot. You get enough petitions, goes on the ballot, and it passes. States where the legislature controls that process and you don't have a ballot initiative, they get shut down because the politicians of both parties won't give up control. They won't give up control until we vote them out for holding on to the control. But it's tough. It's tough. So I feel comfortable in saying, I'm not a cynic. I tend to be a positive person, but I am comfortable in saying that given the ability to gerrymander, state politicians will do it. They can't help themselves. They can't help themselves.
Thank you. And can you just explain to our audience a little bit about how the legislators use census data to draw the districting map?
Okay, well, it's not the census data that is the biggest problem, but the data they use is the problem. You know, maps used to be drawn. Redistricting didn't get out of control until 1988, 1990s or so. And the reason it got out of control, these maps used to be drawn by hand. You had a drafting table, you had a map, you had population figures on sheets, not even spreadsheets. It was before spreadsheets. So you had to draw them by hand. But then around 1988, computers came in. So for the 1990 census, we had computer-drawn maps. And then by 2000, you had map drawing software that went into the process. And then by 2010, you had data mining, where they know, well, here's the demographics that go into map drawing now. And really, it should be just numbers. It should be just the numbers as far as I'm concerned, population numbers. But what goes in there is your income, your average income for the area, your education levels for the area. They have this information. We've all been on the internet and you say, oh, the refrigerator's making a funny noise. I'm going to start looking, buying a refrigerator. And you get in line and you click on a couple of things, you start doing some research on refrigerators. And then all of a sudden, you're on the computer the next day, and all these ads for refrigerators start showing up. And that information is used to target you for ads. They take that same information. They know how much we make. They know our registration. They know how often we vote. They know magazines we subscribe to. And people say, oh, Tony, you're getting paranoid. You remember a couple of years ago when, was it Equinox? One of the... Equifax, one of the rating companies, the credit rating companies, they had a breach, and pretty much everybody's information got out there. All right, and then we say, oh, that's awful, that's terrible that information got out there and everything. Equifax and the two other credit rating companies collect all this information for you. So you say, well, they don't know how much money I make. Well, you ever have a mortgage? They have information on your mortgage at Equifax. You buy a car, they know how much your car loan is. They know how much you make because that information is in your mortgage and your car loan and other stuff and on your credit card and all this. Equifax and TransUnion, the other credit agency, sell that information to advertisers, to manufacturers who want to have that information and try to figure out what we want and what we need and what we buy, what we can afford. They also sell it to those organizations that are hired to draw district maps for various states. That information has always been out there. The only thing that happened this time was stolen rather than sold. So I'm telling you, they do this data mining, and this goes into the map drawing process. And because of this map drawing software they have, if you have a driveway and you got two cars in the driveway and you got a Hillary bumper sticker on one car and you got a Trump bumper sticker on the other car, they can draw a line between the two cars. I mean, that is how precise they are getting with this data mining information. And they use it to a high degree of probability to predict how we're going to vote. I'm not talking about polling. I'm talking about data mining information from magazine subscriptions. If you subscribe to the New Yorker, they're making certain judgments about you. If you subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, they're making certain assumptions about how you're going to vote. And they collect all this information and they use it to draw maps. The maps should be based, in my estimation, numbers alone, just the numbers. No voter registration, no age, nothing. Numbers. How many people are in a district? Draw the map.
I would like to jump in here if I may. One of the things we learned is that in order to test for gerrymandering, you have to have some of that data so you can see how it's being used. When computers started being used, it would take weeks to get results, but now you can get a finished map in about 20 minutes. There's an app called Dave's Redistricting app, and you can try your hand at it. You start with your own neighborhood and you choose for population. You can choose for different criteria. You can make it more competitive. You can make it more compact. And these are choices that are legitimate to make. So when the court case happened in 2017, there was a specialist who came in and drew 500 different maps that would have been acceptable. And then they worked backwards to extrapolate the data that Terzai had provided. And the 500 maps clustered within a narrow range on a graph of different criteria. And the ones that we actually had, the gerrymandered ones that were so egregious, were like out in Pluto of the solar system. And they were as possibly gerrymandered as they could be. Any tiny change would have made them slightly less gerrymandered. So they went to the nth degree, you know, they exploited it. And even more recently, there's an organization, ALEC, what is it, the Association of Legislative Executive Council, or American Legislative Executive Council. And this is a group of businessmen that prepare legislation to hand it to representatives and say, here, we want this to pass, go pass it. And it saves the legislator the job of writing it. Well, they had a seminar recently that, and one of the topics was how to gerrymander without getting caught. So it's out there.
Yeah, it's an accepted practice. I mean, I believe it was a state senator in North Carolina, well, I'm sorry, South Carolina, who said, well, why did you draw a map that resulted in X number of Republicans dominating? And he said, I couldn't figure out a way to do for more. You know, they're unabashed. They see this as proper and right. I think it's an awful attitude. I think it's un-American and undemocratic, but they say, no, the elections have consequences, and we get to do, you know, that in the book Catch-22, you know, if you try to get out of going into battle because you want to play that you're crazy, obviously you're sane enough to go into battle because you're not crazy. And that's, you know, that's some catch, that Catch-22. The real catch in Catch-22 is when the soldiers come in various areas and they tell the people that we can do anything to you that you can't stop us from doing. That's the real Catch-22. And that's the reality of the political process we're moving to and have arrived at in many areas of this country. And certainly that egregious gerrymandering in 2010, 2011 is an example of that. We can do anything to you that you can't stop us from doing. And that's why they're able to ignore petitions, they're able to ignore co-sponsors, they're able to ignore polls, they're able to ignore letters to the editor, they're able to ignore editorials, they're able to ignore everything because they're unaccountable, because they're safe, because we can't vote them out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Tony and Debbie. It was an incredible presentation, and thank you for answering our questions and for providing a lot of insight on this issue. I am going to add the Fair District's website into the chat. Please consider donating to them and helping them with their fight. In addition, we're going to be organizing a group of people to lobby some of the elected officials within Center County. And if you're interested in learning how to do that, Tony is offering a conflict-free way to lobby elected officials. If you're interested in joining, please email me. I would love to have you a part of our little group. But thank you guys so much. If you have any last comments.
Yeah, make this an election issue and contact Debbie about resources for your Democratic candidates so they can make some noise on this issue. When people hear about this, conservative Republicans, they get irritated, they get upset. The people that love this country, that believe in democracy, don't like what's going on. So bring this to your Democratic candidates, have them make it an issue, because they can lay a glove on every one of the Republicans running, I'm sure.
So we are in a unique position here in Center County because we have the Senate Majority Leader in Jake Corman, and we have now the House Majority Leader in Kerry Benninghoff. He moved up the food chain when Turzai stepped down. So we have the leader in both chambers, and we need to make our voices heard or vote them out, or both.
Well, there's nothing inconsistent in having a voice heard and somebody getting voted out.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone that joined tonight. I hope you enjoyed this discussion, and I hope everyone has a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.